Guten Abend, herzlichen Dank für Ihre Einladung hier zu sprechen. Wie schade, dass wir uns nicht treffen können in Zürich, aber so funktioniert das auch. For non-Swiss people, don't worry, I'll do my entire presentation in English. So there are 50 of us in this room. That's a bit much. And I have a PowerPoint presentation, and we have more than an hour to go. But the main thing what I would like to do in this presentation is just to share my story about open science, how it influenced my thinking, how it influenced my library. And I could put these on PowerPoint sheet, and don't worry, I have these and you can get them afterwards. But it's strange to do this online because it's also a personal story for which I would have loved to meet you. And it still is a journey. It's not a success story. It's not a transition from A to B. It's quite philosophical, actually, like Lena said, which I studied in Utrecht. So that is a means of introduction. And as there are 50 of us, I think we all used to Zoom meetings, etc. So please feel free if you have any questions in between. We have a Q&A afterwards, but there are not hundreds of us in this room. So I would love to make it a bit interactive if you like. So that's for a start. I'll start sharing my screen then. Can't see you anymore. But I trust we'll be fine. So, there you go. Opening up your library organization, that's what I called my presentation. And what I propose to do in the next 45 minutes or something is first, well, some definitions. What do we mean by open science, knowledge economy, my personal journey, some elements of high-performing teams. It's not only about us as library leaders or organizations, it's about people. And finally, I would like to share some experience we had in Rotterdam, what we did, our successes and failures, and next steps we see ahead. So that's the general idea. Open science. I took this definition from the Foster project. Open science as a movement to make scientific research, data, software accessible to all levels of an inquiring society. I mean, you see the logos, but it's all levels, and it's an inquiring society. It's not that we send stuff, we allow others to participate, we make things available. And the nice thing is, we can't control it anymore. In the old world, you could control the information you have, and you can give it to someone, and you can decide who you give it to. That's not the case anymore in open science. People will participate, will take your data set, do wonderful stuff with it you never imagined, and that's the fun about it. But that also requires trust. The trust that people will do something good with what you share with them. They don't abuse it. And there's no way you can control it. So the only thing you need is trust to make this happen. Otherwise you can't start at it at all with this open science. So in my opinion, trust is a key thing in this open science movement. And that brings me to another person, Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winner in economy. And he gained his prize by developing models for a knowledge society, for a post-industrial society based on knowledge. And how can you trade knowledge? How can you transfer knowledge? Actually, that's one of the key questions we have in this open science movement. And he says that markets for knowledge and information depend critically on reputation, repeated interaction, and on trust. And there you have it again, on trust. And he said it in a public lecture in 1999. And then you have this strange link below it. Why is that? It's not published in open access. So you have to search the internet and then you find this copy. But there you are, reputation, repeated interaction, and trust. And I can illustrate this with a famous example in economy is when you like to sell a second-hand car, then you need reputation, repeated interactions, and trust. Because in theory, you can't sell a second-hand car. Because if I want to buy it, it's probably worse than the seller tells me. So I'm not willing to pay the price he's asking. So I'm a bit lower. And the seller knows that. He knows that I'm not willing to pay the price. So the price will drop. But even then, I'm not willing to pay the price because I think the car is worse than what he tells me. So eventually, if you would write this down in a formula, the price of a second-hand car would be zero, which is evidently not the case. Why is that? Because you have reputation. Maybe the seller has a reputation, is a good vendor in my neighborhood. He sells a lot of second-hand cars, repeated interactions. And finally, it comes down to trust. Do I trust the other person? And actually, this is a nice thing for libraries, because if you plot this on our library reputation, libraries have a great reputation. Okay, there may be dusty people doing silly things with books, but at least these are people you can trust. They're trustworthy. They give you quality information. So this is a good thing for libraries. This rides up our street. So how can we incorporate this principle of trust in our organization? That's the question that triggered me and has kept me going for, nearly 10 years now. And also in other branches, there are people asking the very same question. And here are some books that inspired me, and especially the first one, Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux, inspired me a lot, because it described the worries that I had at the same time, that the library organization I had wasn't fit for this cultural change, wasn't fit to play this role in this knowledge society. And I'll get back to that later. Because what are the trends we see in the library world? Of course, you know them, and I won't go into them into detail because we only have one evening, and you can have a lecture on any of these topics. But I would like to point them out to give something of a context. First, digitization. All companies, all institutions are hit by digitization. But for libraries, we see them in two ways. Firstly, our processes will change because of digitization, but also our product changes because our product is information. And we see this in an international world. Our students come from all over the place. COVID has made us even more international, I think, because our education moved towards online. We're having this talk. It will be quite normal to have this talk also in the post-COVID era. And one of the effects of digitization is also a stronger client focus. When people go to your building and go to the information desk and ask a question, there's a clear distinction between front desk and back office. People don't know what will happen in the back office. They only see the front desk with the library person in front of them. As soon as you digitize your processes, your clients get all the way, dive into your process. When I order a book at Amazon, I get a track and trace. So I see their entire process, from my order to the stacks, to the mail service, etc. The same happens in libraries. So we need to have this focus on our clients, not on our collections anymore. And these challenges against the context of declining library budgets. At least that's the case in the Netherlands. I guess it won't be any better in Switzerland or any place in the world right now. And I don't have high hopes about the situation after the COVID crisis. This crisis costs a lot of money. And I don't think library budgets will rise or will stay the same. So I see these trends. And one crucial thing, building and information are not connected anymore. So we have to reinvent ourselves. We have to reinvent our services. And I guess we also have to reinvent our library organization. So if you look at evolution of organizations and evolution, I suggest that you move from one stage to the other, and that one stage is better than the other. The latter is not what I mean, but you can have several kinds of organizations, and depending on the purpose you have, one fits better than the other. And what I see most of the times, I won't deal with all kinds of organizations. But what I saw when I entered Rotterdam 7 years ago, I've been director of this library for 7 years now. I saw that most libraries, and also my library, were quite yellow. They were focused on their tasks, they were focused on processes, they had formal roles. You're a desk person, or you're a back office person, you're a cataloger, or you're a library liaison, with lots of hierarchy and lots of stability and control. And as a director, I wanted to move to the next phase. I wanted to be more result-driven, accountable, more innovation, meritocracy, to projects, introduce project management methods, business process management. Well, you got the drill if you went to a management course. And I think we were quite successful with it. 3 years ago, we renovated the building, we replaced our library system. These are all kinds of projects that fit very well in this orange kind of organization. But at a certain point, I noticed that if I would continue this way, I had a feeling that I would, well, how should I phrase it? Rip the soul out of the organization. When my project managers did very well, I gave them a bonus. And actually, they were not very happy with getting a bonus. They were just doing their job, therefore. They didn't want to be singled out from their colleagues. So actually, they were already motivated. They had already a passion for the library and for their job. They didn't need any motivation from me as a manager. And that's when I started to look for an organizational model that doesn't need this extrinsic motivation, but is based on the principle that people are already motivated, and that you don't have to, you simply shouldn't spoil it as a manager. In this yellow situation and orange, there's carrots and sticks. You have to motivate people. In this turquoise or blue organization, people are already motivated. And as a manager, you have to facilitate them. And actually, that's where our journey started. And that's when I thought I need to change my organization into an organization based on trust. What kind of trust? Well, I have the principle that in my organization, people are professional and have a passion for their job. And that's what drives them. Not a bonus, not their wages, not the carrots and sticks or controls. They are already motivated. That's why they work in the library. And actually, that's the nice thing about libraries, I think, all over the world. In every library where I come, people are very motivated to work in the library. If you want to make a lot of money, why don't you go working with Elsevier or Springer Nature? But no, people want to stay in the library because they love libraries. Many people love libraries. That's why you're also in this meeting. So we are already motivated. And as a manager, I shouldn't spoil it. So I'll move to these other kinds of organizations and the transition we made. How do you recognize this task-oriented organization? And that's what we were in Rotterdam, and that's what many libraries still are. And there's nothing wrong with it. And we had a mission like the library maintains collections, provides access to content, provides related services and products, Actually, our mission was like a list of tasks, a list of things we do. And it certainly has benefits. You have a reliable organization, you have stable services, it's very robust. The downside is it can be quite inflexible, and you tend to become a bit inward looking. Because the reason why your services are so stable and reliable is that you make them independent from what happens outside. So whether it's raining or the sun is shining, it doesn't matter. You do what you do. You go to your job at 9 o'clock, you do your job, then you leave at 5, and that's it. Very stable, but not suitable to make any changes. And I think it's quite a challenge in such an organization contribute to the open science movement, because that's so fluid. You can't control, you can't stabilize it. It's changing every day. So then I moved to this result-oriented organization. We changed the library system, we brought all our systems to the cloud, we changed the building, and we developed a mission like, we provide the best possible services. And then in the field of research, education, because I'm from a university library. And it also has some benefits. We are very efficient and we deliver right on time, right on budget. We hired project managers. We got a matrix organization with line management for collections and for the front desk. And we had these programs and projects. But it worked only for a few years. And then, well, as I said, I had the feeling we somehow lost the energy, lost the soul. And that can be the downside of such an organization. Low staff commitment, and it's less effective in the long run. And I put this picture of a call center in this type of organization, because I think for this kind of organization it works very well. But what you see is people don't love call centers, and people don't stay very long at call centers. There's a strong focus on making your money, becoming the best, then move on. That's not an academic library, and it's not like people in academic libraries. So we like to move on. And actually this is my library right now. It has become goal-oriented, and our mission has changed. It's now we help to create and disseminate knowledge. And our promise is we are the content manager of the university. And this mission is goal-driven. Our goal is to create and disseminate knowledge, to add meaning. And it's not so strange. It doesn't drop right out of the air. As a university, you have the task in education and research to create and educate. So for a library, which is a supporting unit within a university, it's the next step. We help to create, we help to educate, we help to disseminate. But this is a mission we feel closely connected to in my library, all my staff. And I particularly like the word help. We like to help people. And in every customer satisfaction survey in the university, we score out of the box for customer orientation. Because at my library, and I guess at your library too, there are professional people who have a passion for their job. So they have a passion for helping people, for giving this information, for sharing. And it's a very broad mission. It doesn't say anything about education or research or how to balance these or collections. Because there are lots of ways in which we can create and disseminate knowledge. And what's effective today may not be tomorrow. So this allows us a lot of room to maneuver, to make our own decisions. And how this works is what I'm going to deal with in the second part of my presentation. Because there are 3 elements you need when you move towards this open organization, this goal-driven organization. And we touched on purpose, and I'll say a few words more about it. Wholeness and self-management. And this is directly derived from this book of Frédéric Laloux, Reinventing Organizations, and he names these three things as the pillars for a teal organization, a goal-driven organization. And that's what I wanted to be in Rotterdam. So as soon as I read this book, I bought a pile of it. I invited my management team at my kitchen table, where I'm sitting right now, and say, hey, what do you think of it? Is this something we would like to try? And said, well, yeah, okay, let's give it a try. And that's where our journey started, to become a goal-driven organization and well, implement this. These are not things you can implement, but well, I don't have a better word for it. Start working in this way. So purpose, what is it and why? Actually, you want to move from a traditional mission, like I showed you, to a noble purpose. And noble purpose sounds so as the moral high ground, but that's not what I mean. It shows what you do for others. It shows your contribution to society. It's not what you're good at. It's not what you're doing. It's what you contribute. It's about meaning. And actually, that's the same thing in the open science movement. It's what you contribute. It's what other people can do with your service, with your stuff. And you don't prescribe it. You just share it. So there's a parallel. And it may remind you of the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. He said you start with the why, then how, then what. And you can see these also. What is a task-driven organization? How is you focus on results? But why is the core thing? Why is what you really contribute? And I like this picture. It's taken from a graphic novel by Möbius. And once you start working on the why, on the purpose, it's more about the journey. The journey gets a meaning in itself. And I guess in Swiss you all read French. So it's about getting on the way, getting balanced in mind and heart before the results. And actually the results are a consequence of your way of working. And that's also in my library now. I don't steer on the results, I steer on the goal. And people can determine their own results. So I like this picture very much. Lots to say about Möbius, but well, that's another presentation. Let's go to self-management. And that's a tricky thing, because we've discussed it in so many ways, self-steering teams, and most of the times it goes awfully wrong. So, well, there's a Dutch example. I'd like to mention it because it's Dutch. It's Buurtzorg. It's an organization in healthcare. It has 9,000 employees and there are no bosses. That's a very interesting example, but there are only a very few examples like this. But I'd like to remind you of an old quotation by Peter Drucker, because we have to make a shift. Self-steering means that we have to let go of things as a manager, and maybe we should, well, at least I got the insight that maybe as a library director, I had become part of the problem. Because when I entered Rotterdam and changed it from a task-driven to a result-driven organization, well, I thought I was doing well. And I still think I was. But after a few years, exactly this result-driven approach had become the problem. So yesterday's actions and decisions, no matter how courageous or wise they may have been, become today's problems. And I think that's, well, you could put it on a tile on the wall, because I think that's the case in many organizations. So autonomy and self-management, what is it and why? And why do we need it? In my opinion, hierarchy can't cope with complexity. And this open science movement and this knowledge society is very complex. As a manager, you don't have all information, you don't have all context, and you can't know it all. and there's no way you can keep up with it. So if you try to arrange everything according to a hierarchy, you inevitably become the bottleneck in your organization. Not your staff, you as a manager is the bottleneck. At the same time, we already saw people in libraries are already motivated. So then you get this strange situation that your people want to do wonderful stuff and that you're in the way. And that you are blocking the means they need to be effective. Like information. Do they all have all information they need? Or are you sitting on it? And you're so busy, you don't have the time to share it. So self-management can be very effective if people have the information, have the autonomy, and you have the other two pillars, which is a shared purpose, because that's crucial. If you don't have a shared purpose and you introduce self-steering, it becomes a complete mess. Why? People go in all directions. If you have a shared purpose, people have a focus, and they may do different things than you thought of, but hey, that's okay. You're only the manager. They're the professionals. So, well, you might like this book, Holacracy. It goes more into self-management. It's about defining roles, about processes, how to make decisions. And one process we have in my library is that we ask for advice, not consensus. So we don't have to agree with everything. If you want to do something, just ask 3 relevant colleagues for their advice. If it all points in the same direction, you're fine, please go ahead. You don't need approval from anybody or your manager. You need approval from relevant people. And this saves lots of time. It's very effective. It saves lots of resources. And I agree, in this way, we do not make the best decisions, but at least the decisions we make are good enough. That's what counts. So in this way, and actually, the funny thing is, online working in this COVID area has made people more equal. When we were in a meeting room, people were still looking, what's the face of my boss gonna tell? But if you're in an online meeting, the one who can key in the chat the fastest is the most powerful. You all have the same picture or same bandwidth. So it's actually that's a nice thing about this online situation. And now in the library, I already said information sharing. If you have an open science strategy, well, how much of the information in your organization is truly open? When you want to do some self-steering, I think all information should be open. People should know what the budget is. People should know what is discussed in the management team. People should be able to reach each other easily. So how is that in your library? Can your staff access all documents of your management team? After the meeting? Before the meeting? In my library, we now have implemented this Microsoft Teams environment, and everybody has access to all information, except for information that is legally confidential, like information from recruitment processes. But in principle, all information is open. Also the information of my management team. Before the meeting, and people can read and write in it. So if people want to comment on documents we are going to discuss in the management team, please do so. Key in your comments. It will improve our discussions. All my staff have a mobile, and they all have the mobile numbers of their colleagues. And it's quite easy to reach each other. If you want to reach me, just look on our website and you get the number of my mobile phone. And if you call me, you get me and not my management assistant. And if you want to make an appointment with me, within the university at least, it's quite easy because you can look in my agenda. You can see what I'm doing, and you can see when I'm available. So that's quite open. And it's very helpful. It's very effective. It's very efficient. And I think it's quite reasonable to do so. Actually, I'm doing this in the time of my employer, so my employer should be able to see what I'm doing. No secret in there. But eventually it also comes down to this open science principle, that the information should be open, that we want to share it. So if we really want to empower people, to allow people self-steering, they should have all the information available. And they should have a mandate. So in my library, all my staff members are allowed to spend money without approval of their superior, at least until 10,000 euros. Above 10,000 euros, we have a process of decision making whether we want to spend this money. But until 10,000 euros, people can decide right on the spot whether they need to spend it or not. Everybody. Also staff at the front desk, everybody. And that's very effective, because if we have a professor at the desk, or he makes a call and he wants a specific journal for his project, my colleague can decide right on the spot whether we're going to do this or not. It's very open, but it requires trust. And fortunately, not everybody is spending 10,000 euros at the very same day. I have 100 people working in my library, so there will be 1 million. I don't have a 1 million available right now. But hey, I have professional staff, and they have a passion for their job. They are responsible. So they can handle this. They don't need me for approval or for budget plans. Then wholeness. And what is it and why? And I put some pictures in, because this is the most difficult concept we introduced in our library. In a task-driven organization, you go to work, and you work from 9 to 5, and then you go home. And your job is like a coat you wear, like a uniform. You take it on when you enter your workplace, you put it off and you go home. And in this way, you only show part of yourself. You show the part that's needed to do your job. But people are far more than that. People have many talents that are not in their job description, or they can have worries. And actually, you would like to have the whole person to be effective, to deal with each other. For instance, when you're in a meeting and someone looks worried, why is that? Is it because she doesn't like your proposal? Or is she worried because she still has to organize the anniversary of one of her kids and doesn't know how to find the time to do so? You don't know. If people dare to bring their entire self to work, work pressure will go down. You get an open atmosphere and you will have less stress. So that's one of the things I thought, well, we should accept. And it really helps people. Already before COVID, in my library, it's okay when people leave after lunch to bring their kids to the swimming lesson and then take up work in the evening. They're flexible because they're good at their job and they have a passion for the library. They won't abuse this freedom. They won't abuse their mobile phones to make calls to the States. They're responsible people. They're good people. They can play to their strengths. So when I say to them, okay, you have a job at my library, but that doesn't mean that you have work. You should create the work that plays to your strengths, play to your talents. And then you can also build your own team. You don't need to stay within your department. You can build a team you need to do what contributes to our purpose. So after we did this for a few years, people started to develop their own teams, to move out of their departments, and they build their own teams. And at a certain point, of course, we still had these departments because we are part of a university with the HR department and lots of hierarchy. So we need departments, hands down. But people were already working in their own teams. So at a certain point, it got quite messy, especially internal communication, because we communicated according to the hierarchy of the departments, whereas people were working in their self-steering teams. So then I asked them, well, shall we change it? Why don't we call the teams you developed departments, and then we fit within the university structure again? So that's what we did. And actually, it was quite fun. It was formally a reorganization, but it was not a reorganization I did as a library director. Actually, I only had to confirm what people already had developed themselves. So it only took a few months, and then it was finished. But what you need for this wholeness is a safe space. So I've put some points on these slides, but this is the most difficult one. And it starts, I think, with you as a leader, but it can start anywhere. With the guts to speak up, to admit that you made a mistake, to ask if anybody has ideas instead of telling people what to do. And it's also closely related to what I put on the side, diversity and inclusiveness. You put talent first, and talent can be anywhere. You don't need a library training to have talent to work in a library, at least not in my library. So one of the things we introduced in my library is anonymous hiring, because we took an implicit bias course and we noticed that we were quite biased, and that we tended to hire the same type of people again and again. So that's why we introduced anonymous hiring. And now our library organization is far more diverse. Over the last year, we hired people from 4 different continents. And they bring something extra to my library. And I'm really happy to have them as colleagues. And I learn a lot from them, and they from me. So that's a lot of fun. But I think it's also necessary to be successful as a library in this knowledge economy, to be successful in this open science movement. But how can you be successful if you only have one kind of people in your library staff? Then it's very hard to imagine how your information will spread and disseminate, and how you can improve your services. So, some core values which help us to make it work. And the key thing is we believe our colleagues are competent and committed. And the guiding principle of how we do things is we just take each other into account. And we have 3 core values. One is our client focus. Service is work done for a customer. Responsibility. You're responsible for your own work, but you're also responsible for the library as a whole. So if a colleague makes a mistake, it's also your responsibility. You can't say hey, sorry, it's my colleague, but he's on holiday for 3 weeks. We'll give you a call when he gets back. No, that won't do. We are all responsible for the library. And if you get a question, you're responsible to handle it. It doesn't mean that you have to know the answer, but you're responsible. Again, this example, if this professor calls me and wants to order a book, because it's, old-fashioned professor and wants to call the university librarian, I want this book, then it's my responsibility that we order this book. And I must admit, I'm very bad at ordering books. I'm very bad at this acquisition process. I'm only the library manager. But still, I'll ask my colleagues for help, cooperation, that's the 3rd core value. But still my responsibility that this professor gets his book. And client focus means that it's also my responsibility a week later to make this call to the professor, hey, did you get your book? Is there anything else we can do for you? And we all feel this responsibility because, we are competent people and committed to our job. So these are our core values. I already told something about organizational change. How do you change in such an organization? And in the traditional way is that top management changes the organization. You have the fridge model, freeze, unfreeze. You have a situation A, you design situation B, you unfreeze, then you freeze situation B, and then you're finished. It's quite hierarchical. You have tasks, you have KPIs. In this purpose-driven organization, the organization changes itself. Like I explained, people start their own teams. It's continuous change. Very hard to grasp as a library manager. So don't try to do so, because it's not necessary, because you have competent people. I will finally, well, it's already nearly 6. So I'll close my presentation with some successes and some challenges we have. What we did, we're quite successful is drawing up plans, learning to make decisions, learning from failures, flex working, which helped us a lot when the COVID crisis hit us. So we could take speedy action in a crisis because people were used to take up responsibility. They didn't sat back and started looking at me and, hey, oh, what shall we do? No, not at all. For instance, within 3 weeks after the crisis had hit us, people formed a team. I didn't ask them to design a library that was fit for the COVID regulations. 1.5 meter distance, it's 1.5 meter in the Netherlands, maybe 2 meters in yours as well. So they hired a design company and redesigned the entire library to be able to reopen when it would be possible. I didn't ask them to. They just did. It was wonderful. But we also have some challenges. The first one is communication. What we didn't realize, if you are allowed to make your own decisions and allowed to start your own projects, is that you also should organize your own communication. Because there's no way other people would know what you are doing if you don't tell them. So on the one hand, people were starting their projects, doing wonderful stuff. And on the other hand, they were still expecting from the management team that they should organize the internal communication. How could I? I didn't know what they were doing. They should tell each other and tell me. That was quite a culture clash. That's something we had to work on a lot. We also had some issues in our management team, because what is our role as a manager in such an organization? As a traditional manager, you have 2 ways to exercise your power, and that's people and money. And I do not control either of them. People can hire their own colleagues and people can spend money. So I've lost my means of control. And the only way I can add to the situation is exercise my talents to add to our purpose. And another thing is how to change plans. If something goes wrong, how do you stop it? How do you change it? That was something we had to learn as well. And that's still a difficult one, because who decides what's right or wrong? Sometimes I see a project and I think, well, I'm not sure about it. But on the other hand, I'm not the expert. So I let go. But to what stage do you let go and when do you stop? And finally, that's the thing we are now working on the most, is how do we relate to the rest of the university, who is still this task-oriented organization, very hierarchical. So it happens that one of my colleagues calls the IT department to order something or to start a project, and they say, hey, do you have approval from your director? And they say, why? Why should I? Well, there are some communication issues there. You can imagine. So that's what I would like to share with you. I'll stop here. I guess there will be some questions as well.